For nearly 250 years, the United States Army has stood vigilant, not merely defending a nation but shaping its very essence. It built bridges in peacetime and stormed beaches in war, preparing for the world as it is and the one that lies ahead. From Lexington and Concord to Kabul and Kuwait, from the muddy trenches of World War II to the era of electronic drone warfare, this tale is more than one of conflict. It is a saga of service, sacrifice. This is the story of the U.S. Army, from its inception in 1775 to the present day. It all began before the nation existed. On June 14, 1775, the Continental Congress birthed the Continental Army and entrusted command to George Washington. To him, this was not a mere title, it was a solemn duty. Washington's army, known as the Regulars, faced daunting challenges, underfed, undertrained, and underpaid. Yet they stood firm. From Bunker Hill to Valley Forge, from Saratoga to facing the might of the British Empire, victory came not through sheer brute force, but through resilience, French support, and a strategy rooted in delay, opportunity, and hope. This was a war of endurance, and the U.S. Army embodied that spirit. Yet, perhaps its most defining moment came not in the heat of battle, but in a quiet room in 1783. George Washington, addressing a group of frustrated, unpaid officers, removed his glasses and reminded them of the ideals for which they fought. In that moment, he relinquished power, establishing civilian rule over military might. After independence, the regular army almost faded into obscurity. The founders feared a standing army could threaten liberty. But soon, conflict erupted once more, against native nations on the frontier and Britain again in 1812. The lesson learned came from President James Madison, who observed the collapse of militia forces and recognized the stark difference between regular troops and militias. The army was no longer a mere contingency. It had been the decades following 1815, as the border with Canada demilitarized and peace reigned with Europe. The army became an instrument of American expansion. Soldiers built roads, manned forts, and enforced treaties. Yet they also waged brutal wars against native nations as settlers pushed westward, culminating in the Mexican-American War of 1846. Driven by manifest destiny and the allure of land, the army devised a three-pronged strategy. Invade the north. The critical blow landed with General Winfield Scott's audacious amphibious assault at Vera Cruz, a bold maneuver rarely seen at that time. From there, his troops advanced to Mexico City, taking the fight directly to the heart of the enemy. Victory brought vast new territories, California, New Mexico, Arizona, and ensured security over Texas. The early army was not just safeguarding. However, the celebrations were short-lived. Over a decade later, the nation tore itself apart. The most painful chapter in American history unfolded as the army that once fought for independence now battled for unity. Over 4 bloody years, the army evolved, growing in size, complexity, and technology. Hot air balloons provided aerial reconnaissance. Triage systems and battlefield medicine transformed how soldiers healed. Repeating rifles increased firepower. More Americans perished in the Civil War than in any other conflict. Yet from this bloodshed emerged transformation, laying the groundwork for a modern army. The Civil War redefined the army's purpose, not just to defend a nation but to uphold its principles. Following the war, soldiers occupied southern towns, safeguarded freedmen, and enforced new federal laws during the Reconstruction era. This complex role demanded that the army act as both shield and scalpel, maintaining peace, while Reconstruction ended in 1877 with troops withdrawn. The army, having tried to heal a divided nation, faced a new frontier, westward expansion. It battled in the Indian Wars, confronting an elusive enemy whose way of life clashed with American objectives. The lessons learned from these conflicts. By 1898, the army shifted focus, looking beyond its borders. It fought and triumphed in the Spanish-American War, securing a new sphere of influence in Cuba, the Philippines, Guam, and Puerto Rico. The army transformed from a frontier force to an emerging global power, but this power faced challenges from Mexico. In 1917, the stage was set for the greatest test yet. When the US entered World War I, the army was unprepared. Yet it quickly adapted, swelling from under 200,000 soldiers to nearly 4 million, a logistical marvel orchestrated by planners, engineers, and the collective will of a nation. For the first time, Americans fought and died in Europe, their names etched into monuments. Between the world wars, the army shrank once more, but history had not finished with it. In 1941, the attack on Pearl Harbor changed everything. The army surged in size, initiating the largest mobilization in U.S. history. From 200,000 soldiers, it expanded to over 8 million. This was no longer just a frontier force. It became a formidable machine of war. Factories, convoys, codebreakers, boots on beaches. The army fought through North Africa, Europe, and the Pacific, liberating concentration camps and helping to dismantle fascism. The U.S. Army of World War II emerged as the largest and most capable force the world had ever seen, with leaders and heroes becoming household names. Veterans returned home, reshaping their lives. But as one war ended, new conflicts arose. Post-World War II, the army remained large, deployed globally as the Cold War dawned. In Korea and Vietnam, it fought proxy wars to stem the tide of communism. Victory proved elusive, and the cost was high, with lessons learned in blood. The army also led operations in Grenada, the Dominican Republic, and Panama, policing trouble on its side of the globe. Back home, the army began integrating. African American soldiers who had fought abroad returned to demand equality, while women expanded their roles within the ranks. The Cold War era thrived on nuclear readiness, civil unrest, and technological transformation, and through 1991, the First Gulf War showcased the Army's unmatched capability in modern combat, leading to engagements in Somalia, Haiti, and the Balkans. These were not full-scale wars, but real missions that tested the post-Cold War Army's ability to adapt, functioning as warriors one day and diplomats the next, navigating a world. Then came September 11, 2001, a turning point that shifted the Army's mission. Deployments to Afghanistan and Iraq followed, as soldiers engaged in a new kind of warfare. For 2 decades, they battled insurgencies, trained allies, and built infrastructure. The army transformed from traditional combat to the pursuit. This was no longer about defending territory. It was about chasing shadowy networks across unstable nations. The battlefield became urban, asymmetric, and relentless. Through countless rotations, deployments, and sacrifices, the army nearly broke but ultimately endured. Today, it faces new challenges in cyberspace, climate, and drone warfare. Yet its core remains unchanged. People, roughly 450,000 active duty soldiers, with another 200. They train in jungles, deserts, cities, and digital realms, poised for conflict while also focusing on prevention, disaster relief, and innovation. And while their missions may shift, their purpose remains steadfast: to protect and serve the nation, even when the battlefield is not immediately visible. Not for glory, but for duty, not to conquer, but to serve. From 1775 to today, the story of the U.S. Army mirrors the story of America itself, its trials, ideals,